You better get ready to rumble, because it's time to box. Hey, what's up guys? I'm Shane from Timber Biscuit, and today we're going to dive into the box joint. Now, I've got a bunch of different sleds and apparatuses for cutting box joints, but my big question is, which one's the best? Is there a best? So today we're gonna dive into each one individually. I'll go over the pros and cons for each, and at the end, I'll let you guys decide. Over here, we have our traditional shop-made table saw sled. This, of course, is our pants router, and I even have this fancy table saw jig from Woodpeckers that allows me to cut variable box joints. So we're gonna take a look at that as well. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, so first things first, I need to set up the sled, and to do that, I'm just gonna attach a piece of MDF to my fence here and create myself a little sacrificial fence. You could also make individual fences for each one of your box joint sizes, but I find that this is a lot easier because I can just make one fence, then knock out a couple of sacrificial ones along the way. So here I'm just gonna use some double-sided tape to attach my sacrificial fence. So with that, just attach our MDF, we're good to go. The next step here is to go ahead and set my blade height, which I'm just gonna match up here. So with the blade height set, I can go ahead and make my initial cut. Check the height. And we're just a hair over, which for this type of joint is fine. So now that I've got my initial cut, I'm gonna go ahead and pop my fence off. If it wants to go, there we go. And now I'm just gonna cut myself a piece of scrap that's the exact width and height as this piece. And I should also probably note that the blade I'm using here is a 1/4 inch flat grind blade, so I need to make sure that I mill my material down to a 1/4 inch, not an 1/8 of an inch. Now, any flat grind blade will work for making box joints, but I do like the 1/4 inch ones because it gives a little bit more meat on those teeth. All right, so now we can test that fit. Yeah. Next, I want to trim this guy down. So I'm just gonna make me a quick mark right here, put an X on this side so I know which side's my scrap, pop it out, and we'll get her cut. There we go. From there, I can just bring it over to the bandsaw and trim it down. I do want to take a section out of the center. This way, I'm not in any of the areas where it may have gotten some planers tonight. So. And then from there, I can go ahead and glue the pin back in place. Or in place, I guess it was never there. Just start semantics. Use way too much. Perfect. So with my glue mostly dry, I can go ahead and slide the fence back on. I'm gonna take my offcut scrap piece, slide it in between the blade and my pen, nudge the fence over until it's nice and flush, and lock it in place. Now here I'm just going to take my marking gauge, set it to the height of my board, and I'm going to take that mark all the way around. Now doing this just really prevents a lot of tear out, especially with softer lumbers and species like pine, for instance. But it's best to do this for all your boards. So with my fence all set up and my board marked out, I can go ahead and make the cuts on my first board. For this one, I'm gonna align the board directly against the pen and then make my cut, lift the board over, place it on top of the pen again, and make the subsequent cuts. Once that's done, I'll go ahead and cut board 2. And if you guys are digging all the tips you're finding in this video, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps the video out, and I greatly appreciate your support. From there, I'll just rotate my workpiece, pop it back on my pen, and grab my second board, and butt it right up against the first. Find the best way, there we go. And continue to make the cuts. All right. So let's talk about this a little bit. Now, while this isn't the tightest of fits, it's also not the loosest. There's plenty of room for this joint to get a little bit of glue in there, and once it does, it'll probably expand a little and tighten up even more. But this is where the table saw kind of falls flat. Because if I want to adjust like the length of these pins, for example, I now have to raise my blade, which could give me a little bit of a longer pin. But if I wanted to go with a shorter pin, I would then have to go back and finagle my alignment pin to be a little bit lower. I think the table saw is a really good option if you're gonna do a small batch. You could probably knock out larger batches with the table saw, but trying to be consistent with that type of sled and these joints is really difficult. I've been successful with like larger box joints on the table saw, and I wasn't sure if it was really gonna work out until the very end. With shop-made jigs, you can get there like 90% of the way. I want something that's gonna be there 99%. So while I am happy with this joint, and that will absolutely work for most people out there, in my shop, I'm looking for something a little bit tighter, and I think that we can get there with one of our other jigs. So when it comes to making variable box joints at the table saw, I like to use this. This is a sled by Woodpeckers called the Adjusta joint jig. It does a really nice job of allowing us to create variable box joint sizes in each piece, and I'll show you how that works right now. So the way this jig works is it uses a pin system that allows you to drop this tapered pin in and follow a template that you create along the back side of the jig. Once you've created your system, you can just take this table, flip it down, rotate the entire thing 180 degrees, flip it back up, and now you've got your mating template side. The cool thing is you can adjust each of these pieces independently for your own style of box joints. There are different sized pins that are made for different size blades. This one that I have installed is specifically for the 1/4 inch blade. And I'm just gonna go ahead and flip these around. And once I get everything locked in place for my pattern, I'm gonna just screw this down, then lock in my table. And nope, I lied. I need to flip this over once. There we go. And this is gonna be our starting side. All right, so just like the last set, I'm gonna go ahead and use my marking gauge, and then I'll from there set my blade height. So I just want to do that until I can just barely feel the top of the table saw blade and then lock it in place. This also comes along with a stop so that you can make sure you don't cut past where you need to. And from there, I just need to clamp on my workpiece. The cool thing is that if I want to adjust the spacing because my joint is too tight or too loose, I can just rotate this, and by exposing more of the taper, I'll loosen that joint. By exposing less of that taper, I will tighten that joint up. And as I go, I'm just gonna make a pass, slide it over, drop in my pen, make a pass, slide it over, make my second pass, and so forth. Let's see. Those look pretty good. Go ahead and pop this piece out. And now from here, I'm going to loosen up my table, get this out of the way, flip it down, flip my template 180 degrees, Flip my table back up and lock it in place. Next, all I have to do is reattach the board and follow this template. All right, let's go check the fit. So as you can see already, we're much more snug this time. Yeah, that is a much tighter joint. Now, once you get this tight of a joint on this type of jig, you don't have to worry about redialing anything in because everything is set. So there is some benefit in having a jig where you can set it up once, dial in all your settings, and get this tight repeatability over and over again. So now that I've dialed everything in and I can confirm that everything's nice and tight as far as my blade height and my pin settings, why don't we do something a little different and do a variable box joint on the next set? So 4, 4, 3, 3, 5, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3, 3. All right, we'll try it out. Let's see what it looks like. It's not gonna be even, but this is a hypothetical anyway. So which style of box joint do you like the most? Do you prefer the more consistent box joints, or do you like something a little bit more variable? Let me know down in the comments, and as always, if you let me know what your favorite box joint is, either consistent or variable, I'll reply to you first because I know you're paying attention. And there we go. This time we have ourselves a nice variable set of box joints. And again, super tight, super consistent, and repeatable. Those are the things that I'm looking for when I'm trying to use a jig in the shop. So with that in mind, let's get on to setup number 3. But before we hop into the final shop setup, I want to take a moment and talk about my new bed frame from FlexiSpot. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. I'm a furniture maker. Why didn't you just build one? Between projects, filming, and life, I wanted something that looked really clean, fit my design aesthetic, and didn't turn into a month-long shop project. So this is the Japanese joinery bed frame from FlexiSpot. And what really sold me is how stable and well built it is. The joinery is built with interlocking joints instead of a bunch of hardware that can loosen over time. The slats are also secured with Velcro, which helps stop things from moving around and prevents a lot of those squeaky noises you get from other beds. It's also made from solid rubber wood, which is a nice finish. It genuinely feels like a nice piece of furniture, not something that's just disposable. You can also customize the setups with different headboards, nightstands, and even some adjustable backrests. Plus, there's about 10 inches of clearance under the bed, which is awesome for storage. So if you want to get a bed frame that looks great, stays quiet, and is built sturdy, check out the link below. And use code TimberBiscuit for an instant discount. So the next solution on the list is the Panta router. And the Panta router is a pretty cool machine if you haven't seen one used before. You can do all sorts of different joinery, different types of cuts with this machine. For this one, obviously, we're gonna be setting up box joints. I've gone ahead and already installed some of my box joint templates. I'll show you how we can adjust those along the way. Basically, this machine works by utilizing a template that you attach to the fence here and trace it over each area using a bearing. That bearing rides in those grooves and in turn makes the machine follow your template. Everything that's up here is 2 times what it's going to do over here. So if you use 1-inch templates over here, those are gonna translate into 1/2-inch marks. So I've gone ahead and prepared my boards. The first thing we need to do is align the center of our boards to the center line that I've marked here on the machine bed. I'm gonna take this one here, move it along the fence, and then just line up my center marking with the center marking here on the bed. So once we're all locked down, I can go ahead and install my 1/2-inch bit. So now I'll just overhang my workpiece by a little bit and lock my clamps in place. So after seeing the width of my board, I realized that I'm a little bit narrow on my templates here. So what I'm gonna do is pop on 2 more onto either end. And you can see they just slide on the track here and then lock this in place. So first things first, I need to set the depth of cut to my line here. And I'm gonna do that by nudging it over and placing just the tip on the end. Lock that here and lock it in place. And just for good measure, we'll add on the safety, the micro adjustment, so we don't go past our mark. All right, so now that I've got everything dialed in, I'm gonna use a piece of 1/2 inch stock here as a spacer for my bottom panel, which I'm gonna slide in this way. And then I'm also going to slide in my top panel at the same time and make both of these cuts at once. Lock it down. All right, and now we're ready to make our cuts. So as with our previous joints, now we can go ahead and check our fit. And as you can see, the panther router, things are super tight. And we are left with a very nice, clean, repeatable joint. So now that we've seen each solution in action, let's take a look at the results and see how they stack up. So our first one was our table saw sled, and as you can see, we have consistent cuts across our entire joint here, but there's no variability, and each one of our fingers are gonna be 1/4 inch. We can space out that pen a little bit and obviously create some different size joints, but that would require us to reset that pin every single time and develop new fences for each one. When it comes to the woodpecker sled, you have to set it up once, and that initial setup is a bit cumbersome, but it allows you to create variably spaced fingers pretty quickly. So once you set it up once, it's very easy to reset that and then create different patterns with the template, which honestly is a big plus. If you're gonna be building out a ton of boxes, I would suggest checking out the woodpecker sled. I think it does a really good job dialing in those joints and creating a really crisp end result. If price is of no value and you wanna do a bunch of different joinery, then definitely take a look at the panther router. The panther router is actually going to work long-term more for other types of joinery. You can cut dovetails, mortise and tenon, basically anything under the sun with the panther router. So while these first 2 solutions are limited to straight up box joints, the panther router is pretty unlimited in the amount of joinery you can do. I do think it's also important to point out that none of these joints are glued up or cleaned up or anything. This is just the raw results of what they look like off the machine. I have no doubt that with a little bit of wood glue, some sanding or hand planing, I could clean all these joints up so that they're super presentable for any furniture piece. But in any case, I appreciate you guys checking it out today and hanging out with me in the shop. And as always, I knew this would work, and I'll see you next time.